If you think Gen Z is simply addicted to their phones, you're watching the wrong movie. It's not addiction, it's evolution. If you were born between 1997 and 2010, you're part of the first massive biological experiment in human history. Humans whose nervous system extended into the cloud. Your parents learned to use the internet. You live in it. But what price does a brain pay when it never disconnects? Spoiler, it's not what you think. And it's changing the species forever. If this kind of depth matters to you, subscribe to this channel. We explore the psychology behind how generations think, feel, and survive. Let's get into it. To understand your brain, we first have to look back at your parents or bosses from Generation X. They were called the latchkey kids. They came home from school to an empty house. No internet, no supervision. And most importantly, in absolute silence. That forced boredom made them self-sufficient. But you, Gen Z, are the anti-latchkey kid. You have never been alone in that way. Since you can remember, you've had your friends, your enemies, and all of human knowledge in your pocket. Sociologists call this a phygital existence, physical plus digital. For you, online life isn't a place you enter like the Matrix. It's a layer that sits on top of reality at all times. There's no distinction. If someone takes your Wi-Fi, it's not that you get bored. It's that you feel like you're missing a limb. And here comes the hard data that older generations love to criticize. The 8-second filter. A famous Microsoft study said Gen Z's attention span dropped to 8 seconds. Less than a goldfish. But here's the thing. That's a misinterpretation. It's not that you can't focus, it's that you have an ultra-sophisticated garbage radar. Think about it. You grew up with a tsunami of information hitting your face 24/7. If you paid attention to everything, your brain would collapse. You developed, evolutionarily, a filter to scan and discard the irrelevant in seconds. It's not attention deficit, it's attention economy. But there's a hidden cost to this hyperconnection. By eliminating dead time, those waits at the bus stop or in line where you used to just stare at the ceiling, you also eliminated boredom. And neurologically, boredom is vital. It's the moment when the brain rests and processes emotions. If you fill every microsecond of emptiness with a TikTok scroll for quick dopamine, you never sit alone with your thoughts. And think about it, if you're never alone with your thoughts, how do you learn to deal with what you feel when things get bad? If you're finding value in this, hit the like button. Let's go deeper. Because ironically, having the world in your hand has brought a side effect nobody saw coming. And it's breaking records in psychology clinics everywhere. Here's where it gets dense but fascinating. If Gen Z has access to meditation apps, talks openly about mental health, and has far more understanding parents than previous generations, why do the statistics say they're the most anxious, depressed, and medicated generation in history? It's the anxiety paradox. Compare it with Gen X. They grew up with defensive pessimism. Their strategy was to put on emotional armor. Don't cry, suck it up. The world is hard. They repressed everything. You, on the other hand, practice radical vulnerability. You talk about your traumas, your ADHD, your burnout on social media with the same casualness as ordering a pizza. And that's incredibly brave. But there's a limit. Psychologist Jonathan Haidt, in his book The Anxious Generation, marks a chilling inflection point between 2010 and 2012. What happened? The mass arrival of the smartphone and social media with a front-facing camera. The graphs for anxiety and self-harm in adolescence shot up vertically in exactly those years. That's not a coincidence. The problem isn't just looking at screens, it's comparative surveillance. Your parents compared themselves to the neighbor or the classmate. You compare yourself algorithmically to the best bodies, the best lives, and the greatest achievements of the entire planet. 24 hours a day. It's a competition that's rigged for you to lose. Your primitive brain doesn't know that photo has filters and 50 attempts behind it. It just registers, they're better, I'm not enough. And there's something curious about therapy as identity. By labeling every uncomfortable emotion with a clinical diagnosis so quickly, I'm not sad, I have depression. I'm not nervous, I have anxiety. Sometimes, without meaning to, you lock yourself into that label. Gen X ignored their mental health problems until they exploded. Gen Z sometimes defines themselves so much by their problems that they forget who they are without them. Subscribe right now, because what comes next is the identity crisis nobody's talking about honestly. This leads to an uncomfortable question. If your identity is so tied to how you feel and how others see you on a screen, who are you really when you turn off the phone? Are you you? Or just another skin you put on to survive the algorithm? Here we enter the territory of identity, and it's fascinating to see how it's mutated. Gen X had a golden rule: privacy is power. The less they know about you, the safer you are. For them, having two faces, public and private, wasn't acceptable. For you, having multiple personalities isn't fake, it's survival. Gen Z intuitively understood that identity is a performance. You have your official Instagram, your social resume, your Finsta where you're real and you cry, your LinkedIn profile, your Discord avatar. You're not fake in any of them, you're fluid. It's what we call liquid identity. You know the algorithm is judging you, so you learn to hack it by showing different versions of yourself. And here comes the famous main character energy. Many older people mock this, calling it narcissism. But think about it. If you grew up with a camera pointed at you since birth, it's logical that you see your life as a movie. Romanticizing your life, playing sad music on the bus, imagining you're in a music video. It's a brilliant defense mechanism, a way to reclaim control in a world that feels chaotic and uncontrollable. If the world is burning, at least I'm the director of my own scene. But this fluidity has a price. The search for external validation is addictive. Gen X wanted respect for their competence. You seek emotional resonance. And that explains why gender and sexual identity in Gen Z is so expansive. It's not a trend. It's a categorical refusal to accept the static boxes of the boomers. Why choose one label for your entire life when everything else in your world, your feed, your trends, your technology, changes every 24 hours? But this extreme freedom brings existential vertigo. If you can be anyone, and if the job market and economic future look like a pyramid scheme, why bother following the old rules? That brings us to the most radical shift of all: how Gen Z sees work and the future. They say nobody wants to work anymore. But let's be honest, this isn't an attitude problem, it's pure math. Gen Z watched the millennials follow every rule, go into debt for college degrees, and still not be able to buy a house, and said, "No thanks, that scam isn't for me." This is where quiet quitting was born. For a Gen X boss, doing only the bare minimum is disrespectful or lazy. For you, it's a rational cost-benefit calculation. Why give 110% of your energy when the salary barely covers 60% of your cost of living? The social contract that promised hard work equals stability broke before you could sign it. Your loyalty isn't to the company, it's to your time. This has generated a unique life philosophy: optimistic nihilism. It sounds dark, but it's actually liberating. The premise is, if the world is ending from climate change, the economy is broken, and nothing has a guaranteed intrinsic meaning, then I'm free. Free to seek experiences now, not in a retirement that might never come. And this perfectly explains Gen Z humor. Gen X humor was ironic and sarcastic, an intellectual defense. Gen Z humor is absurd, surreal, and Dadaist. Deep-fried memes, context-free images, visual chaos, jokes about mental health. Why? Because if reality out there has no logic, your humor doesn't need logic either. Laughing at chaos is the only sane way to live in a world that seems to have lost the script. It's not that you don't care about the future. It's that you're redefining what success means. It's no longer the big house and the new car. It's mental health, free time, and the ability to disconnect in a world that never sleeps. Maybe, just maybe, Gen Z isn't the crystal generation that breaks at everything. Maybe they're the only ones who realize the machine everyone is running on at full speed isn't going anywhere anymore. And stepping off that machine isn't giving up. It's waking up. If this changed how you see Gen Z, Subscribe and hit that like button. Share this with someone from a different generation who needs to understand. Tell us in the comments, what's the one thing about your generation that nobody gets right? See you in the next one.